Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we've got something pretty special lined up for you. We've been digging through a really interesting stack of sources.
Yeah, some fascinating stuff that kind of challenges how you might normally think about things.
Exactly. We're going to unpack, well, three core questions. First, what really makes things opposite, especially when it comes to food, like spicy and, well, we'll get to that. Then we tackle a big one. Is there a limit to being all-powerful? That classic paradox.
The rock question, always a good one.
Right. And finally, something maybe a bit closer to home for many of you. Do your choices in video games actually matter morally?
Ooh, that one gets interesting.
It really does. So our mission today is simple. Cut through the complexity, pull out the key insights, and give you that shortcut to, really getting these topics. Some potential aha moments ahead.
Let's do it.
Okay, so kicking off with this first idea from the sources. Rating spicy foods. Someone suggested minty as the opposite.
Right, and apparently that got quite a bit of pushback online or wherever this was discussed.
Yeah, you can imagine. People jumped in saying, well, shouldn't it be milky? Because, milk helps cool your mouth down.
Which makes intuitive sense, of course. You drink milk, the burning stops.
But the sources point out a bit of a logical snag there. Just because something neutralizes or counters, an effect doesn't automatically make it the opposite.
Exactly. The example given is water and thirst. Water gets rid of thirst, obviously. But you wouldn't say water is the opposite of thirst, would you? It's the solution, maybe, but not the conceptual opposite.
That's a great point. So this pushes us towards a deeper question. What actually defines an opposite?
And the answer, according to these sources, really hinges on context. It's not absolute.
How so?
Well, think about sound. What's the opposite of a loud sound? In most everyday situations, you'd say a quiet sound, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Not like the total absence of sound or silence, or even the non-existence of sound waves. If you inverted every property, you'd just end up with nothingness, which isn't very useful for discussion.
Okay, so context is key. How does that apply back to spicy food then?
Right. So first, we need to understand what spicy even is, scientifically speaking. And the sources are clear. It's not actually a taste, like sweet or sour.
Oh, what is it then?
It's a sensation. It's caused by chemicals like capsaicin activating specific nerve receptors in your mouth. They're called polymodal nociceptors.
Nociceptors?
Yes.
Those are pain receptors, aren't they? Or danger signals.
Essentially, yes.
Right.
And critically, these are the exact same receptors that detect extreme heat, like actual high temperatures.
Wow.
So spicy food literally tricks your brain. It makes your brain think your mouth is experiencing intense heat, even though the food itself isn't hot.
Okay, that's fascinating. So it's an illusion of heat. Given that, what would the sensory opposite be?
Well, following that logic, the sources propose menthol, the compound that gives minty things their characteristic coolness.
Ah, I see where this is going.
Because menthol does the opposite trick. It activates different receptors, ones that specifically signal cold sensations to your brain.
So one chemical fakes heat, the other fakes cold.
Exactly. They're both creating powerful sensory illusions, but in opposite temperature directions. That's why, in this specific sensory context, minty makes a really strong case for being the opposite of spicy.
That really clicks. It's like they're pulling on opposite ends of the same sensory rope, the temperature illusion rope.
That's a good way to put it, like two ends of a seesaw, as one source described it.
Okay, really interesting perspective shift there. Let's move from sensory illusions to a grander philosophical puzzle, the omnipotence paradox.
Right, the classic. Can an all-powerful God make a rock so heavy that he himself cannot lift it?
It feels like a perfect trap, doesn't it? Say yes, and God can't lift the rock, so not omnipotent. Say no, and God can't make the rock, so again, seems not omnipotent.
It does feel like a catch-22, and the sources show, thinkers have wrestled with this for centuries, coming at it from different angles.
What are the main approaches?
Well, one angle, maybe less common now, but still present, is the idea of voluntary limitation. Meaning that true omnipotence includes the power to choose to limit oneself. So God could choose to make a rock he couldn't lift as an act of self-limitation. It doesn't undermine the omnipotence itself.
Like the Christian idea of kenosis, where Jesus gives up divine power.
Exactly like that, yeah. That's often cited as an example of this kind of thinking. Making the rock is a demonstration of power, including the power to self-restrict.
Okay, that's one way. What's the other main view?
The more dominant view, and the one the sources seem to emphasize, focuses on logical contradiction.
Okay.
This perspective argues that omnipotence means the power to do anything that is logically possible. It doesn't mean the power to do things that are inherently contradictory or nonsensical.
So like asking God to create a square circle.
Precisely. Or a married bachelor. Or the sources example, a triangle with 4 sides. These aren't actually things that fail to be made. They're just meaningless combinations of words. They describe impossible states.
So the idea is that a rock too heavy for an omnipotent being to lift is like a 4-sided triangle. It's a contradiction in terms.
That's the core argument, yes. An omnipotent being, by definition, can lift any weight. Therefore, a rock an omnipotent being cannot lift is a logical impossibility, not a task that tests power.
Is there an analogy maybe to make that clearer? The sources mention one?
Yeah, there's a helpful one. Think of the laws of logic like non-contradiction. They aren't like the specific rules of a game, say, the rules of chess.
Okay.
They're more like the fundamental conditions required to have a game at all. You can't have a game where moving a piece both is and is not allowed at the same time. It breaks the very concept of rules of a game.
I see. So logic sets the boundaries of what's even possible to do or make.
Exactly. So the ultimate conclusion here is that omnipotence doesn't include the ability to make logical contradictions real, because they aren't real possibilities in the first place. It's not a limit on power. It's a clarification of what power applies to.
That reframes it completely. It's not about a lack of power, but about the nature of possibility itself.
Well put.
All right, let's shift gears again. From the cosmic and logical, let's bring it down to something you might do every day, playing video games.
Ah, yes, the ethics of virtual world.
Exactly. Our sources pose this really spicy question. Are you, the player, morally obligated to choose the good option in a game when you face those moral dilemmas?
It's a great question because games are different from just watching a movie, aren't they?
Right. You have agency. You're the one making the choice, doing the action, even if it's virtual.
So how do the sources tackle this? Well, first, they make an important distinction. Virtual harm versus real harm.
Okay, the obvious one. Stealing a virtual car isn't like stealing a real one.
Correct. And importantly, they point to empirical studies. Research consistently shows little to no link between playing violent or, let's say, immoral video games and actually committing crimes or being violent in the real world.
So the whole video games cause violence argument doesn't really hold up based on the evidence?
Largely no. The link just isn't strongly supported by data, but that doesn't end the ethical discussion.
Right, because even if it doesn't cause real-world harm, there's still the act itself within the game.
Exactly. And this is where the sources bring in virtue ethics.
Okay, remind us what that is.
Virtue ethics focuses less on rules or consequences and more on character. It asks, what kind of person should I be? What would a truly virtuous person do in this situation? And the sources use a pretty bad example to illustrate this. Can you picture, say, Jesus of Nazareth? Or maybe Gandhi, gleefully going on a rampage in Grand Theft Auto?
No. Probably not. It feels intuitively wrong, even if it's just a game.
Right. Even if the consequences are zero in the real world, the act itself might feel misaligned with the kind of person one aspires to be.
So there's this intuitive wrongness, even if it's minor.
Yeah, maybe trivial is the word used, like telling a small white lie. It's not a huge moral failing, perhaps, but it's still not perfectly virtuous, you could argue.
And cultural context matters here too, right? Like how different generations view game violence.
Absolutely. The sources mention how, someone older who didn't grow up with these games might be genuinely shocked by simulated actions that a younger player barely registers. Our intuitions are shaped by our experiences.
But then the sources introduce a philosopher who takes this even further. Thomasick.
Brian Thomasick, yes. He wrote an essay called Do Video Game Characters Matter Morally? And his argument is, well, it's quite something.
Go on.
He argues that even NPCs, non-playable characters, the computer-controlled figures in games, have some minuscule, tiny amount of moral value.
Seriously.
Because they are programmed with preferences, goals, reactions. They exhibit behaviors that simulate suffering or pleasure, even if it's just code. He suggests this gives them a very, very low level of moral consideration.
So, it's wrong to be mean to an NPC. Even a little bit.
Thomasick's argument is that it's not zero wrong. It's vastly less significant than harming a real person or even an animal, of course. He sees it as a continuum, a difference of degree, not a fundamental difference in kind.
Is there an analogy for that?
Yeah, the sources mention his analogy to animal ethics. We generally agree animals deserve moral consideration, even if most people value human life more.
Okay.
Thomas suggests you could, in theory, extend that continuum downwards past animals to these artificial agents in games. Their moral worth is incredibly tiny, almost negligible, but perhaps not absolute zero.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to think about. Does the author of our source material agree with that?
Interestingly, no, not fully. The author finds the conclusion hard to swallow, but thinks the question itself is fascinating and important to wrestle with.
Yeah, especially when you think about the sheer scale of interactions in games worldwide. If every NPC has even a tiny bit of moral worth, that's a staggering amount of simulated suffering happening.
It boggles the mind, doesn't it?
It really does.
Oh.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the ground we've covered in this deep dive.
Sounds great.
First, we saw that opposite isn't fixed. It's all about context, like with Spicy and Minty, those cool sensory illusions of heat and cold.
Right. Then the omnipotence paradox. The key takeaway was that omnipotence relates to what's logically possible, not making contradictions happen, because those aren't really things to be done.
And finally, the ethics of virtual worlds. It's not just about real-world harm, which seems minimal according to studies.
No, it pushes us to think about virtue ethics. What kind of person are we being in the game? And even raises that wild idea about whether digital characters might have some minuscule moral standing.
Yeah, lots to chew on there. We definitely encourage you, the listener, to keep reflecting on this stuff. Think about your own gut feelings, where they come from, your cultural influences.
Yeah.
Keep that philosophical inquiry going.
Stay curious.
Absolutely. And maybe here's a final thought to leave you with, something building on all this. If things like opposites and omnipotence are defined by context and logic, how might the constantly changing, evolving context of these virtual worlds we're creating, how might they continue to shift and maybe even redefine our understanding of moral responsibility and what it even means to be a good or virtuous person, an agent within them?
That's a deep one to ponder.
Definitely something to mull over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time.